Earlier today, President Obama announced that Chuck Hagel is leaving his job as Secretary of Defense. He's departing less than 2 years after taking the job, and it's the first major post-midterm change-up for the bruised Obama administration. My co-captain tonight, Bloomberg national political correspondent Josh Green. Josh, welcome. Did Chuck Hagel have to go, and why?
Well, I think he did, and I think the reason why he did, this is his ouster is the latest sign of Obama bending to the whims of Washington rather than coming in and changing them as he'd originally hoped to when he was elected president. There is a long, venerable, post-defeat Washington tradition of finding a scapegoat and pinning him on that. Lately, that's often been a Secretary of Defense. You remember after 2006, the war in Iraq cost Republicans control of Congress. A couple days later, Donald Rumsfeld is out.
I think this is totally different. First of all, Hagel was picked. I thought it was the worst personnel decision President Obama made in the entire time. I think he got rid of him because Hagel did not get along well with the White House. He was being overridden by the very tough bureaucrats who work at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I honor his service. I think he's done a lot of great things in public life, but I think he cannot manage the Pentagon. He cannot play nicely with the people in the White House. Too much on the plate to having a guy who couldn't function.
I don't think you're wrong about any of that, but at the same time, I still think that this is part of the new post-election imperial Obama who's going to get his way on immigration, on climate change, who's going to show he's strong, going to show he's not a lame duck. I think Chuck Hagel just happened to be an easy guy to make a scapegoat.
Ted Cruz wants Joe Lieberman to be Secretary of Defense. What do you think?
I'll bet that's not going to happen. My money is on Michelle Flournoy, the former undersecretary, would be the first female defense secretary. Other names we've heard bandied about, Deputy Secretary Ashton Carter, possibly Jack Reed, who, if Democrats win back the Senate, would probably be a future Armed Services Committee.
We're about to have our first female Secretary of Defense, I bet, and she'll get confirmed. All right. Negotiations on how to curb Iran's nuclear program were extended by 7 months today. That was just hours before the deadline that was set for the talks. Secretary Kerry was meeting with his foreign counterparts in Vienna, where those talks have been pushed into next year. Negotiators are now still wrestling with things like how much nuclear power Iran can produce, what happens to those very tight economic sanctions, and how much free reign international inspectors should have in Iran. Secretary Kerry had this to say about the delay.
We don't want just any agreement. We want the right agreement. Time and again, from the day that he took office, President Obama has been crystal clear that we must ensure that Iran does not acquire a nuclear weapon. Period.
So the question now is this delay good for President Obama? Is it good for getting a deal? I have always thought, as much as a deal might be in the world's interest, there's no way to get a deal that the president likes, the Iranian hardliners like, the Congress likes, and Israel likes. And if the president can't get Israel's stamp of approval on this deal, I don't see how he can make it, whether it's today or 7 months from now.
I don't see how this bodes well for an agreement, because you've essentially had 12 months of talks. Each side knows what the other side wants and is not willing to grant it. But having said that, I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing for Obama personally, because if you look ahead over the next 2 years, it's becoming more and more likely that he's going to be able to walk away from the White House saying, during my presidency, Iran did not get a nuclear bomb.
But who's to say they're not secretly developing one now and they're just buying time?
You know, maybe they are, but he could still get to 8 years saying, you know, it didn't happen on my watch. We kept the U.S. from having to bomb Iran, and we kept Israel from bombing Iran. That's not nothing. It's not an agreement, but it beats going to war. And it seems more and more likely this gets punted to the next president, whether that's Hillary.
I remain skeptical about a deal. I just don't
or Rand Paul.
All right. A classic Friday news dump last week in Washington brought us yet another report on the 2011 Benghazi attack. This one was a result of a 2-year investigation by the House Intelligence Committee, chaired by Republican Mike Rogers. That report found no evidence of an intelligence failure prior to the attack, and it also seemed to dispel GOP claims of a cover-up. One Republican, who's had a Benghazi bee in his bonnet from the start, had this weekend some choice words about the report.
I think the report's full of crap.
Oh, Lindsey Graham's position notwithstanding, Josh, does this report effectively end Benghazi as a political issue?
That's not a bee in his bonnet. That's a hornet's nest buzzing around his head. No, I don't think it does. And late this afternoon, we got a statement from Mike Rogers, or the spokesman for Mike Rogers, who's the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Intelligence Committee, yeah, saying, and you can see in the statement how this is going to continue. He said, look, we understand people are upset about our report. We only covered the intelligence community. We found no wrongdoing there. But he said there remain unanswered questions about the State Department and about what happened at the White House. And by specifying State Department, that means Hillary Clinton's feet are still to the fire. This issue is wide open for other Republicans to keep prosecuting, as Senator Graham indicated a few of them wanted to do.
And Speaker Boehner, who I think politically would like this issue not to be front and center, just announced shortly before we went on the air that Congressman Gowdy of South Carolina is in fact going to return as the chair of the select committee looking into Benghazi. Has Democrats on it, but I just think if you're a Republican and you're worried about governing or you're worried about 2016, this is never going to be a big enough issue to make it worth distracting the public from what they care more about, which is the economy, jobs, health care, etc.
Agree, but at the same time, the Republican base is not going to let go of this issue. They're not going to give a free pass on this any more than they are on repealing Obamacare. So you have to keep this on, if not the front burner, then the back burner.
I would like Republicans, before they criticize the report, to read it. Maybe that's too much to ask. All right. With the anticipation of 2016 dancing in the head of George Stephanopoulos, President Obama was asked about Hillary Clinton during an interview this weekend and said he would do anything it took to get a Democrat elected to succeed him. But the president said he was also realistic about just how helpful he could be.
I think the American people, they're going to want that new car smell. They want to drive something off the lot that it doesn't have as much mileage as me.
I'm virtually certain the founders never talked about new car smell. All right, the Senate 2016 has also been on our minds as well, which is why we commissioned our first joint Bloomberg Politics St. Anselm, New Hampshire poll. That was released today. The poll was conducted for us by Purple Strategies. They're one of the most accurate pollsters from the 2012 cycle. Here's what they found in the survey amongst Granite State Democrats. Hillary Clinton way ahead, 62%. Now, she's ahead in, of course, every poll, but 62% amongst New Hampshire Democrats is a very big deal. Josh, I ask you this. Is Hillary Clinton's presidential bid helped or hurt by President Obama?
Well, I think her bid for the Democratic nomination is helped because despite everything, Obama is still popular with a lot of Democrats, most Democrats. But at the same time, I don't think Hillary Clinton at this point, looking at polls like ours, is especially worried about winning that nomination. And in the general election, absolutely, he's a problem. If you look at Democratic Senate candidates in states where Obama was particularly unpopular, by and large, they lost. If you look at public polls of what people want in their next president, Pew did one that said 65% of people want policies different from the last president. That's something that's going to be difficult for Clinton to achieve.
Look, John McCain had to try to figure out how to distance himself from George Bush, Al Gore from Bill Clinton. I think Hillary Clinton will tie herself in knots, because she usually does, about complicated things about how to do this. The good news for her is Barack Obama will cut her all the slack she wants. He doesn't care what she does in terms of distancing. Now, we also did some stuff with the Republicans on this poll. We asked Republicans who they wanted for president. And as you can see, we asked with Mitt Romney in there, even though Romney says he's probably not going to run. 30% for Romney, pretty dominant lead in a big field. But then we took Romney out, and you can see it's basically a three-way race. Chris Christie, Rand Paul, Jeb Bush, all bunched up around 15%. Finally, we asked, again, a general election electorate, in 2016, which party's candidate will care more about people like you, regardless of who the candidates are? And you see they're basically tied there. Josh, quickly, my question is, do the Republicans have candidate or candidates who can do well in that cares about people like you category?
Potentially they do. And look at the two leaders of our polls. You have Chris Christie, who before this bridge scandal was best known for his aftermath, his response to the Hurricane Sandy, hugging the president, emoting with people suffering in New Jersey. Clearly, he's got that potential. And I think that the sort of curveball here is Rand Paul, who has made a great deal of effort to talk about reforming prison sentences, doing things, identifying with a community of people that Republicans in the last 10, 20 years haven't traditionally tried to identify with. I think that could help soften the image.
Watch Jeb Bush, watch Rob Portman. I think they've got a history of being able to do pretty well on that issue.